Well, hello, folks. Thank you for joining the Missouri Department of Conservation for our wild webcast on mushroom hunting today. I'm Joe Jarek with the Missouri Department of Conservation, and we'd like to welcome our topic expert for our webcast on mushroom hunting. Joining us today is Melissa Brigler. And we'll get to see her here in a minute. So thanks for being here, Melissa.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be joining you today.
Well, and you have some areas of expertise in this, so tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what got you interested in mushroom hunting and mushrooms and all of that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, actually, my area of expertise truly is in plants. So I work as a botanist for the Conservation Department and have been working full-time with the Conservation Department since 2007, late 2007, and really did start off just as a botanist, and still am a botanist, but that kind of has led me more into the realm of mushrooms as well. We don't have a staffed mycologist with our department, which would be a person that studies mushrooms. But, just kind of naturally, whenever there's unidentified mushrooms out there or somebody doesn't know what it is or if they can eat it or if it's poisonous, we'll think, well, we'll just ask the botanist. That's kind of fell onto me over the years. And over the years, I have learned quite a bit about mushrooms and mushroom identification. I still have quite a bit more to learn. It's always a broadly expanding, and I don't think I'll ever be able to learn it all, of course, but just kind of a continuing process. And part of that process has been joining the Missouri Mycological Society. And over the years, I have gotten quite involved with that society as well. Currently, I serve as the executive secretary, and then also I'm the president of the Mid-Missouri chapter. So the society has chapters throughout the state. And currently, I'm leading the one here in Central Missouri. I do work out of the Jefferson City office. So I've been a member with them since 2011, so it's been quite a while. And I do want to share that involvement and that cooperation I have with the society with you today, too, because a lot of the pictures that I show, and certainly a lot of the information that I'm expressing today, I've learned a lot from the members and from the society there, too.
Excellent, and we will share more information about the Missouri Mycological Society later in the presentation, including some upcoming events and things. So getting it real basic, what does mycological mean? What's that reference?
Mycological is the study of fungus.
And so, mushrooms are fungus.
Correct, yes.
Right. Some people might think they're kind of odd plants, but they're not plants.
No, they are not plants. And so totally different kingdom even. There's the plant kingdom and the fungus kingdom. And so they're not related. They don't have roots like plants. They don't produce seeds. They don't produce flowers. Fungus produces by spores. So what we see is a mushroom coming out of the ground. It does kind of look like a plant. Somebody might think it's some sort of plant. But what it really is the fruiting body that the fungus has produced, and that its purpose is to produce spores and release them into the environment so that fungus can reproduce. So very, very different than plants. Very
different. And like you said, the mushroom itself is the fruit of the fungus. And if we think of fungus maybe as kind of like that traditional, the iceberg, where what you see on top of the water is just a very little bit of it. So that mushroom is just a very small part of a much larger network that lives and grows underground, right?
Right. And a lot of times people use the analogy that is a mushroom is like the apple on an apple tree. So whenever you're picking a mushroom from the ground, it's kind of like removing the apple from the tree. So even though you remove the apple, that tree is still there and the larger organism, but the fungus is actually still remaining there, just like the apple tree would after you remove an apple.
Well, very good, very good. And folks, we are going to ask Melissa some questions today. We also want questions from you. So share your questions with us. Go to the chat box on the right side of your screen, and then you can submit your questions that way, and we'll kind of get to what we can as we can. So thank you for joining us very much, and let's have more fun. So mushroom hunting, hugely popular, especially this time of year. So what's it kind of take for somebody who wants to go but hasn't been mushroom hunting? Kind of what's involved?
Well, it is very easy. It's, all age groups. If you're young or old, I bring my young children out mushroom hunting. I can bring my grandmother out mushroom hunting. So as long as, you can get around fairly well, it's all different fitness levels and everything. It's very enjoyable, especially this time of year. You can go mushroom hunting most months out of the year in Missouri and still hope to find an edible mushroom. But especially in the springtime, this time of year, everybody's just itching to get outside and
It's
enjoy
morel
nature.
season.
Yes, and you can hear the turkeys gobbling too, and you see the birds flying in, and tropical migrants arriving.
Spring trees are flowering. It's just really a beautiful time to be outside in nature in Missouri this time of year.
Correct. And, even if you don't find any mushrooms, it is kind of a bonus just to be able to be out in the woods and spend some time enjoying nature. And then, also with any other outdoor activities, it does require a fair amount of investment of, purchasing the equipment to go fishing or hunting, or you have to buy your permits. With mushroom hunting, all you really need is to get a basket or like a mesh bag to carry the mushrooms that you're hopefully going to be collecting, and a pocket knife, and you're good to go. So a very, very cheap way to enjoy the outdoors as well.
Right, it is so inexpensive. And that's a great question because we already got a question from Jill asking, do you need a permit for mushroom hunting?
Well, it really depends on where you're at. If you're on a conservation area, you do not need a permit for hunting.
Mushroom hunting.
For mushroom, of course. Thank you for that
Yes,
clarification. Yes, for mushroom hunting. For conservation areas, those are properties owned by the Missouri Department of Conservation and managed by them. You can collect mushrooms for your personal consumption. So you cannot collect mushrooms to sell. If you wanted to sell the mushrooms, you would need to be finding some private property that they would allow you to go and collect the mushrooms on their property to sell. And then also, it's important to check local regulations. So some of the regulations we have on conservation areas, particularly those around nature centers and conservation areas that are close to larger cities and metropolitan areas, do not allow collection of mushrooms, even for personal consumption, because of the high volume of visitation that we have on those areas. So you do have to check, but generally speaking, most of the conservation areas that we have in the state do allow a collection of mushrooms for your personal consumption. And it also is important to check other regulations for other government owning land. So, for example, the state parks. Some people kind of easily make the confusion that the conservation areas are on the same set of rules as the state parks. But that's ran by the Department of Natural Resources, so you would need to check their regulations then.
Okay, so the short answer is you don't need a permit to go mushroom hunting in Missouri in that sense. If you're on conservation areas, you may pick them on most areas for personal consumption. You cannot buy them or sell them. If you get them from conservation areas, you could share them. And then some of our areas, especially nature centers, for example, you're not really allowed to remove anything from that. Yeah. So another question we get a lot this time of year, people are selling morels, for example. Yeah. So what are some of the regulations, or what do you need to know if you are either selling them or buying them from someone, say at a farmer's market or even online?
Well, in Missouri, to sell mushrooms, you are required to be, by the Department of Health and Senior Services, you are required to be certified in the identification of that specific type of mushroom. So, for example, if you wanted to sell morels, you have to be certified to be able to identify morel mushrooms. It is kind of difficult sometimes to find a place to be certified for Missourians to do that. There's not a lot of options out there. You can go out of state and get a certification from out of state. But anybody selling mushrooms must have that type of certification.
Okay, and that certification formally goes through the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services because it's an edible for people. It's food for people, so it affects people. So if you want more information on certification for mushrooms, you could check out the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services. They'd be your source for that, or you can go online. And as really a protection and precaution for people buying mushrooms, you want to make sure that whatever you're buying has been certified, each and every mushroom.
Right.
Because one bad mushroom can cause a lot of problems. So if you're looking to buy morels or any other mushrooms, make sure that every mushroom has been certified so you can trust that they are indeed morels, right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and we're talking about now spring mushrooms. It's morel season, and that means, I mean, yummy stuff
Oh my
in the
goodness,
spring,
so much fun stuff to eat in the
right?
spring, right? Turkey and crappie too, and morels. And sometimes when you're hunting morel mushrooms, you kind of wish you were turkey hunting because you hear the turkeys gobbling, and kind of the other way around, you find some morel mushrooms when you're out turkey hunting. So it's just wonderful time of year to be mushroom hunting in general. So we can talk about morels first, since that's what most Missourians are probably the
Oh,
most familiar
sure,
with.
sure.
Would you like me to go ahead and go through some common ones?
You know, we're going to talk about morels, but Michelle has already asked. So most of Missouri, yesterday was not a typical spring day. We had snow here in Jefferson City, frost over much of the state. So after yesterday's weather and the frost last night, how long do we need to be waiting for morels to start popping up, or would that have killed the ones that are already up?
That is such a really good question. It really depends on what the weather is going to be like in the next couple days, I would say. Here in central Missouri, we had a really heavy frost this morning. I know that. And of course, with the snow, I was kind of hopeful yesterday. The snow melted so fast. I thought, well, maybe it's really not so cold and we might be able to find some that haven't been damaged from the frost. But I really think that probably what I saw this morning in central Missouri is most of the morels that were out last night, and the ones that might have survived and could be out tonight, are probably going to get hit pretty hard by the frost. But no, as the weather warms up, it really just kind of depends on how quick those temperatures rise. But once we start getting a few more days in the mid 60s or so, some nice sunny days, and it should not take very long for everything to start kicking back in again.
Well, good. And we're going to get into a little bit more about hunting them, where to hunt them, what to do with them and things. But let's get back to, so morels in Missouri, we have 3 common species people should look for.
Right.
Tell us more about those.
Right. Okay. Well, the common morel is the one that you see on the left side of the screen, and that's the one that people do most commonly interact with or encounter. Some people refer to them as blondes or grays. And they're the ones that get a little bit larger. So, morels can kind of range. I mean, you can find little small, tiny ones and larger ones. I'd say with the common morels, probably, an inch would be inch and a half tall would be a pretty small one. They get up to 3 or 4 inches, maybe even 6 inches.
Right. We had a record
ones.
morel online that was found in Missouri that was like 13 inches and about a pound. And that was some years back, but that's not typical, right? Typically,
No, that's a bit quite impressive. Yeah.
right, 1 to 3 or 4 inches.
6-inch tall morel
Okay.
is a nice one. But probably more than that. I'd say that's noteworthy. That might be worth calling in the conservation department with some bragging rights there. But
And then the black morel and the half free. Tell us a little bit about them and how big they get. And
the black morels are typically a little smaller than those common morels, and like the photo shows, it is a little bit darker in color. And then the half-free morels are usually quite smaller. They're 1 to 3 inches or so, and their stem proportion is a little bit larger. Compared to the cap and the stem, they're a little bit longer stem, it appears. And you can tell that half-free morel whenever you cut it lengthwise down the middle, and you can see that the cap is not completely attached to the stem at the base of that cap. So that's what you can see in that lower right corner. And one other thing to point out is whenever you do cut open a morel lengthwise down the middle, like the 2 bottom photos are showing, they are completely hollow in the middle. So even up into the cap. And that's a really nice distinctive feature of true morel mushrooms. It makes it very handy to be able to explain if somebody really does have a true morel or something else. If it's totally hollow in the middle, that's a good characteristic of a morel mushroom.
well, very good to know. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So morels, it's the time of year when in general
Yeah.
do folks go morel hunting?
Well, about this time of year, that snowstorm we had yesterday hit it right just about as we were getting into the peak of morel season. So kind of jumbled things up there a little bit. But yeah, usually from March to May. Normally, mid-March is pretty early, but if we've had a warm spring, it could be morel season then. And then if we've had a pretty late spring, we might see morel peak even into May.
Those warm, sunny spring days as the ground's still moist, but things warm up. So generally from March to May, and again, to emphasize, true morels, you want to slice them open and you want them to look like this, folks. So they have pits instead of folds, and they're hollow throughout the whole center, right?
Yes, that's correct.
We're going to talk some mushrooms that aren't morels but could look like them, and those could hurt you or kill you.
Right.
So, biggest question we get from just about everybody, morel hunting. We'll talk a little bit about where, but what's your favorite place to hunt morels, Melissa? What's your honey hole?
Is that one of the questions that came in?
Everybody wants to know.
Yeah, I am not telling.
Which is the answer everybody gives too, because those are like best kept secrets.
Sure,
right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of competition in the woods.
Yeah.
People out hunting. Robert wants to know, in addition to us, what else eats morels?
Well, let's see. I know that turtles eat mushrooms. I'm sure they would eat a morel mushroom. I always find lots of bugs in there, so they're probably munching down on them too. You know, I'm a little hesitant to say. I think that deer have even been known to eat mushrooms. But I'm not quite absolutely certain on that. It seems like somewhere back in my mind, I remember hearing somebody saying that the deer can eat mushrooms. Let's see. I can't think of any others right now.
There's other critters.
Yeah.
Mark wants to know, do the black morels taste different than the common morels?
I don't think so. I've never heard of them being tasting any different. I certainly couldn't tell the difference, but no, I think they do taste about the same. And the half-free, they're all very, very closely related species too. And mentioning, you know, what your favorite place is or whatever, there is some good truth in that. If you do find that honey hole, it's going to be, you know, an area that fungus is very healthy in the ground and is producing a lot of mushrooms. Now, as whatever organic material that is breaking down, as it is getting broken down over the years, you might see those morels starting to slack off. But it's always good to check those places. You've found a lot of them in the past.
And when we're talking places, without giving up any secrets, generally, where should one kind of look for morels? What are the kind of...
Well, you know, it's always good to find low-lying places that kind of stay wet for periods of time,
so
longer
like
periods of time.
bottomlands, along rivers, streams, things like that.
Yeah, places with really deep, fertile soils have good organic matter. Places certainly around dead or dying trees. And again, that's because this fungus is growing and doing so well in places like that. It doesn't mean the fungus can't grow in areas that are more dry and even under areas of nice, healthy looking trees. So that's what kind of makes this morel mushroom such a tricky thing to describe where to find it, because it is truly a common occurrence in Missouri. I found it in places that I was very surprised at. But if you do come across places that are very rocky and there's exposed rock and very thin soils, I wouldn't waste my time much hunting morels in those areas.
So they like kind of some shaded, moist, fertile soil. And like we say about trees, you plant the right tree in the right place and it's going to grow well. So if you look for morels in the right place, you're more lucky to find them.
Correct, yes.
Valerie wants to know, so do the little morels like just pop up overnight? Or if you find some small ones, can you come back in a day or two and will they get larger?
Find them larger?
Yeah.
It certainly. You can catch them as they're still developing. And if you wait a little bit longer, they would. Now, the thing is, too, you don't want to, you always kind of take that risk. It's a little bit like gambling, you know, because something might have come along in the night and eaten up your morels that you were waiting on to get bigger. So it's a bit of a gamble to do something like that. But yeah, that certainly can happen where you're just kind of catching them just as they're starting. And I don't know. It depends on, you know, environmental conditions and things of how quickly that mushroom is going to develop, if one day is enough or if it needs 2 days. But yeah, I'd say within a couple of days.
All right. So you're out in the woods, you're hunting for morels. A couple key things for folks to remember with really mostly morels, but other mushrooms. You want to have a mesh bag or a basket with holes, because you mentioned mushrooms reproduce through spores. So you don't want to use like a plastic bag, because as you're walking through these areas, all those mushrooms you pick, they will be releasing spores out of the mesh bag or basket and kind of fertilizing that area for some new mushrooms, right?
Theoretically speaking, so you know, it might work, it might not work, but
it's better.
It could. Yeah, it's certainly a good idea. And if you hang around mycologists very often, or people that do mushroom hunt quite a bit, they know that too. You always see them walking around with their baskets.
So mesh bag or basket with holes.
Yeah.
Another quick thing, we compared morels kind of like apples. So when you go to pick an apple, you want to take the fruit, but you don't want to kind of take the branch with you. So with morels, it's real important to have a sharp knife and cut them at the base of the mushroom. Never pull the mushroom out of the ground.
Yeah.
Because that's like ripping a twig off an apple tree. You're hurting the overall.
Yeah, the fungus will still be in the ground. You're not going to be able to remove all the fungus or anything. It's just kind of like that apple tree analogy. You're not tearing down the whole tree, but you don't really want to take the whole twig down whenever you just want to pick the apple. So that's a good reason. And not just morels, but even all edible mushrooms that you're looking to harvest. And it kind of helps keep your basket cleaner. You don't have quite so much dirt or anything on that too.
So always cut, never kind of pull them out. So we've been out, we have some morels. We're very excited here. Kind of what do we do with them once we get them? How do you cook them? I've had them pan fried and sauteed like you see up there, but some other ways. And then how you keep them?
Well, first of all, whenever you get in, from your venture out collecting the mushrooms, you do want to wash them very well and, gently though. I mean, we don't want to be scrubbing them or anything because they'll kind of crumble if you do that. But first of all, soaking them in some salt water. And it doesn't have to be, precise measurements or temperatures or anything like that. Just put, some salt, a tablespoon or so of salt, and stir it up and soak your mushrooms in. And
for about how long?
Not more than an hour. An hour would give it plenty of time. I'm sure some people are probably thinking, oh, you don't need to do a whole hour, but somewhere between,
15 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
And the reason we do that is because there are little bugs and insects and tiny critters in all those folds, so that salt water will kind of flush them out, right?
Yeah, it'll kill them. It'll kill those little bugs. Yes.
Okay, which is always good. So you want to soak them, and then when you could just pan fry them in some butter or olive oil?
Well, that's why I think 90% of us always seem to have them fried. We are in the Midwest, right? So fry anything. But yeah, fried or sauteed in some olive oil with garlic and some salt and pepper are delicious. And then also creamed if you go ahead and just put them in some butter and cook them. It does not take long to cook at all. Just,
and then add some cream and you have like a nice thing.
Nice fancy bread to go with it. That's really good.
Getting hungry here.
Yeah.
So if you can't use them all at the same time, what a terrible problem to have, right, folks? You have too many morels. I see up here, quickly tell us to freeze them and then to dry them.
Yeah, and morel mushrooms you can freeze raw, so you don't have to cook them first or anything. And some people do like to even prepare them for frying before they freeze them.
So flour them before flour them, put them on a baking sheet if you could freeze them that way, and then you could put them in a bag once they're frozen. That'll help.
Right, yeah, kind of keep them separated out and everything so they don't kind of, freeze together and
so that's pretty simple.
Yeah.
And then to dry them, you could dehydrate them with a food dehydrator, right?
That is the method I would recommend. So you can find stories online and about, oh, I didn't need that. I just dried them in my oven or I put them out in the sun. But I would recommend using a dehydrator on a very low heat and over a long period of time. So just take it, 8 hours or so, just to slowly dry them out. And they'll keep like that in a jar for years even. And then when you go to use them, as long as you don't let water get to them.
Well, right, they have to stay dry. When you go to use them, you reconstitute them like a lot of dried things, whereas you soak them in water for a bit for them to kind of absorb the liquid and soften up again. Couple things, folks. Some folks say you could put them in a low oven or, like Melissa said, out in the sun. If you need more information on that, we just have to ask you to go Google it and search for those methods. We recommend really just using a dehydrator. So that's how you cook them. This is how you could preserve them. Some mushrooms you don't want to cook, eat, preserve, or use in any way. So what are the false morels, for example?
Well, so the false morels are a totally different species, so they're not even closely related to true morels. And you'll see in the gabbled and the gabbled false morel and then the red false morel on the upper pictures there. And both of those morels are very closely related to some highly toxic mushrooms that are not currently found in Missouri, but they could be. They could be in the future. And then they have there's other mushrooms that have a higher level of this toxin called gyromitrin. The mushrooms that we have, the false morels in Missouri that we have, do not have quite that level of toxin in the mushrooms, but they do have some. So it accumulates in your liver whenever you do ingest it if you're not able to cook it out. So for that reason, the conservation department really does recommend that nobody eats these mushrooms because of that. So because of that risk.
Right.
Now, there are a lot of people out there probably listening in it now that have eaten those mushrooms for decades. And it's like, oh, I'm fine. It doesn't bother me a bit. Those people are probably very lucky that they successfully took that toxin out, or it is accumulating in your liver and you just haven't felt the impact of it yet.
So after time, you may. And now, key thing with morel, again, always make sure what it is and always slice them down the center. And if so these aren't hollow. The false morels aren't hollow like true morels.
No,
right?
they are not. So if you would cut that lengthwise down the middle, you would find kind of a corky, spongy substance in all three of those mushrooms there.
And, as the saying goes, there's risky mushroom hunters and there's old mushroom hunters, but it's a big challenge to find a risky old mushroom hunter because even eating one of these, might not kill you, but it could make you really ill. So, and another thing you mentioned with morels and most really other edible mushrooms is you also want to cook them before eating them.
Yes.
And that's to really kill any bacteria that might naturally be in there to also help avoid you getting sick. So don't eat these, folks. Go with the true morels and all should be well. So let's see, Christy wants to know, when you're out morel hunting, can you use like the scraps or to grow your own morels? These aren't like commercial mushrooms.
They are very tricky to successfully grow. So I wouldn't say that would not work because you might get lucky there, but it is very tricky.
Okay. Brent, we're going to get to some field guides, so and we're going to talk some poisonous mushrooms. But let's move on to our next item, which is the oyster mushroom. Tell us more about that.
Well, actually, we have two separate species of oyster mushrooms in the state, but they're very closely related and very difficult to tell the difference between the two species just by looking at them. You'd actually have to get a microscope out and look at the spores. So, but both are edible, and one species prefers the cooler weather and the other species prefers the warmer weather. So that provides us in Missouri an opportunity to collect this edible oyster mushroom throughout most of the month.
How handy is that?
That's
right.
Nice. Yeah.
Different, but they grow different.
Right now, what we would be seeing as the species that is more favorable to the cooler weather, but in the heat of the summer, we might come across these too, and that would be a different one. But they're both edible, and they both taste the same. So
this is what they look like. Now we're looking for these. What are we looking for? Those overlapping caps. So it almost looks like multiple mushrooms.
It does, yeah, but overlapping caps, and they always grow on wood. So if it's not growing on wood, then it's not an oyster mushroom.
Good to know.
They do have this off-center stalk, so it's kind of a semicircular cap to it. Very well-defined gills, and then those caps get to be 1 to 8 inches long. But again, those can be overlapping, so the whole,
So each of those little caps, multiple caps, but each of them could be 1 to 8 inches long. So you could find a pretty big oyster mushroom.
And it could even be a little bit longer than the 8 inches, but.
Okay, so we're looking for them growing on trees. We could find them pretty much year-round. Always wood. Dead or dying. Now, just elm trees?
Well, not just elm trees, but particularly common is with elm trees. So if you find what you think is an oyster mushroom growing on an old tree that's dead that is not an elm, I wouldn't rule that out, but it is primarily elm trees.
And some of them look like oysters, but might not be. Now, those aren't poisonous?
Well, right. So there are some lookalikes that have that kind of shelf appearance and growing on dead wood. And yeah, they just wouldn't taste very well. They'd be pretty, kind of like cardboard.
Yeah,
and
cardboardy.
As far as it being actually dangerous, there aren't any poisonous lookalikes of oyster mushrooms.
So you could find oyster mushrooms pretty much year round. Always look at them on dead or dying wood, fallen stumps, logs, even some live trees, things like that if they're dying. So we find our oyster mushrooms. What do we do with them?
Well, so we can kind of make that decision again. Either are we going to eat them now and enjoy them now or preserve them. So if we're going to eat them now, and either way, again, we want to first be sure we wash them in salt water and clean off all those dead bugs and everything. But if we're going to go ahead and cook them, just like with the morel mushrooms, they're good pan fried or sauteed.
Always want to cook the oyster mushrooms though, right? Don't eat those raw.
Oh yeah, cook all
Okay.
wild collected mushrooms need to be cooked before you eat them.
Okay, and some like commercial mushrooms like shiitake,
Yeah.
you don't want to eat the stems because they're just woody and don't taste good. So with oyster mushrooms,
Yeah, these would be kind of same way.
so you
Their
want to
stem
focus
gets
on
like
the kind of the nice fluffy caps
Right.
and maybe not the stem. Okay, and then again, you could freeze them, but you want to boil or saute oyster mushrooms first.
Yes, yeah, this is one of the mushrooms that you do want to make sure you do that. If you don't, then they get kind of mushy whenever
Mushy,
you
it's
thaw
kind of
them
like
out.
you want to blanch vegetables a lot of times before
Right.
freezing them so they don't kind of get mushier
Yeah,
things.
yeah, some mushrooms hold their texture after they're frozen, but some do not, and
Okay.
this one is that one.
So oysters don't. And again, you could use a dehydrator to hydrate them and then pickle them.
Yeah, you can pickle them.
I've
Doesn't that
never
sound
had
delicious?
pickled mushrooms.
Yes.
Wow.
They're wonderful. I haven't tried the pickled oyster, but the pickled hen of the woods we'll talk about
Okay,
today.
we're getting to that, folks. Okay, so again, thank you. We're getting a lot of questions. Share your questions through the chat box and we'll get to what we can. So we've moved kind of through the spring, morels and oysters. So coming up in the upcoming months, what can we look for then?
Yeah, well, this photo shows, it's kind of whenever the ticks and chiggers are out real
Yeah.
good, and you know it's the woods are getting real thick and yeah,
hot
maybe
and
not quite as
humid.
pleasant as it was
Right.
in April and May. So yeah, actually this is the time that chanterelles would be coming out, and you know I really do probably kind of argue chanterelles are possibly even more delicious than morel mushrooms are.
And they look beautiful.
Yeah, it's just that morels are so much more popular because people want to be outside now.
And it's nice in the spring to be outside as opposed to kind of that heated
Yeah.
summer.
Chanterelles are out when nobody in their right mind would want to go walking in the
Right.
woods. It's hot and sticky, but as long as we've got hot temperatures and humidity, we should have a fairly decent chanterelle season. And they're easy to spot. They're not like morels where they're camouflaged.
So we have the 4 species. Quickly, tell us about the 4 species and again, how to
Sure.
identify them.
Yeah. So the most commonly encountered ones that we see are the smooth chanterelle and the common chanterelle. And so the smooth chanterelle, they both look similar in this kind of vase shape. They're both about the same size.
How big do they get on average?
6 inches or so.
Okay.
Yeah, 6-inch chanterelle is a really nice one. But yeah, they get about that tall. And then
The tinies, those are adorable. How tiny is tiny?
well, only a couple of inches tall.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty small, and we don't see them as often, but they're out there quite a bit too. And then the cinnabar chanterelles are fun. They're just a different color,
They
and they're
really are. And
a
that
little
bright
smaller, too.
orange, again,
Yeah.
folks, there are other mushrooms that are bright orange that can kill you. Do not eat those necessarily. Always know your mushroom, but the cinnabar chanterelles, again,
yeah,
delicious.
they're
How big do they get?
They're they're smaller than those smooth and common chanterelles, so probably about 2 to 3 inches.
Okay, and then when you're hunting chanterelles, we're going to talk about where to look for them here in a minute, but you find some, like the morel, you want to slice them hollow center throughout. With a chanterelle, what are you looking for?
Well, the chanterelle does have another like nice little feature that we can really hone in on, and that is the inner part of the mushroom is completely white. So whenever you cut that mushroom down lengthwise down the middle, you should see nothing but the color white in the middle.
Okay, and as we see in that photo, white.
Yeah.
Not off-white, not yellow, white through the whole thing.
Mhm.
All right, and then real quick, chanterelles have ridges which are kind of more folds than the gills of many mushrooms, which are more like an accordion.
Right. So the chanterelle mushroom is up there on top with the ridges, and if you look closely, if you can see it, it does have more folds. It's not a true gill where the true gills go directly from the stem to the edge of the cap.
And they're very symmetrical. Those ridges align symmetrically.
It's
So
a difficult characteristic to pick up on sometimes. It can be tricky, but cutting it down the middle and seeing the white throughout the middle is the way
that's
to go.
key. So where do we find chanterelles?
Well, let's see. Well, through the woods, in wooded areas, and they're scattered throughout the forest floor. So, you know, some of our lookalikes grow in really tight clumps together, but usually just kind of in low-lying areas too, or on kind of a hillside even, kind of the lower part of that hillside. But
So they're not going to be in a cluster, kind of like morels. They're going to be individual mushrooms popping up.
Yes.
But if you find a nice honey hole, you hopefully will have a lot of the individuals popping up in that area.
Right. And you do want to be careful with chanterelles. It's one of those that you can actually over harvest over time. So a lot of other mushrooms you can kind of harvest a lot throughout the years and never seem to have an impact on it, but chanterelles are not like that. They can actually decline if you over harvest.
Don't clear out an area. You want to leave plenty just so you could come back in the future and get more. Always cut them at the base, never pull them, put them in a mesh bag so you can help those spores kind of populate. And looking at the chanterelles, they're also growing in kind of moist woodland areas.
Yes.
Is that where we want to look for
Yeah,
them?
in the woods, yes.
Okay.
And I have that photo of that lady just sweating because it's just such
Because it's that heat of the summer,
time.
right?
Yeah.
But hopefully, you know, some
But it
cool
is
woods.
wonderful. Yeah, get out there early in
Yeah.
the morning. It's great.
And if you're hunting chanterelles, what do we not want to pick?
Well, there are actually some very dangerous lookalikes out there, and some of them do come out more in the fall, but their seasons do overlap just a little bit, depending on the weather conditions for the year. So one of them is the fall chanterelle, and that's what's shown on the left side of your screen. And you can see when you cut that, it does sort of look like a chanterelle. It's kind of that base shape.
Right.
But if you cut it down the middle, it's not completely white. There's some areas where it gets kind of orange
Yeah,
and
so
tan.
from tip to
all
the
way.
bottom of the stem, white.
Yeah.
You want to look for white.
Right,
Okay.
right. And then the jack-o'-lantern mushroom actually comes out, kind of around Halloween time. But if there's kind of some early jack-o'-lanterns coming out and some late chanterelles hanging around, those two can overlap.
Okay, jack-o'-lanterns, not edible.
Those are actually very, very poisonous. They'll make you sick.
They'll kill you. They could make you really, really sick, or even
They'll
kill
make you wish you were
or
dead.
wish you were dead, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so that they will make you sick, but they do grow, and also with the big laughing gem, which is another poisonous mushroom, it always grows on wood, which that would be a good indicator. I should have mentioned that chanterelles grow on the ground; they do not grow on wood. So if a mushroom's growing on wood that you think is a chanterelle, then it's not a chanterelle.
Okay, so chanterelles mostly during the summer, and then as we move out of the heat, we move into the fall. And there's some more yummy mushrooms that we could look for in the fall. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, spring gets all the focus, but really some of these other seasons have some wonderful mushrooms too. So yeah, in the fall, things are kind of cooling down and we see chicken of the woods. So we, again, kind of with the oyster mushrooms, we have two very similar species of mushroom that are both referred to as chicken of the woods. The one on the left is referred to as sulfur shell sometimes too, but more often both of them are chicken of the woods. They both taste wonderful. They both taste about the same. So to most people, it really doesn't matter which species it is, but we do in fact have two. And so they grow in this shelf kind of arrangement on wood, and usually on down logs or dead standing trees.
And they're usually going to kind of have that color where it's light yellow or white around the tip, and then it gets a little darker orangish as you get more towards the base, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's wearing hunter orange already. Like you can kind of spot those from a distance.
That's handy.
Very nice, yeah.
And here's some more pictures. So we're looking for chicken of the woods. 12 or 2 to 12 inches wide, that whole cluster.
Well, actually, the caps are 2 to 12 inches wide.
Of those caps.
Yeah, it can get quite huge.
Quite big. Okay. Yeah. Then look for those again, dead or dying wood, May through November, but they really come out in the fall.
Occasionally we'll find some in the spring, but it's just an occasional, it's more of a fall mushroom.
Okay, and when we see some of these sliced, when you slice them, those have that white inside.
Yeah, they kind of look like chicken meat.
And I think we have another picture coming up
that shows
really shows that.
Yeah.
So here's for chicken in the woods, and then kind of that cousin, in a sense, is the hen of the woods.
Yeah. And so a lot of people think it's the same mushroom, but these are really actually very different.
The color's different too, right? Chicken of the woods, kind of the white and orangey, and the hen of the woods is...
It looks like a ruffled up hen, doesn't it?
A roosting hen with kind of fluff feathers, browns and tans and whites.
Yeah, so you really have to be kind of right on top of it to see this one. You really have to give it a good look. And
you're looking at the bases of trees and stumps.
Right.
And again, from September to November. Now, these don't have gills.
No, they do not. And if you find something that looks like hen of the woods but has gills, then you did not find hen of the woods. That's something else. Yeah,
okay. So we got a basket full of these. What do we do with them now?
Well, okay, so after we, wash them up, of course, in some salt water and then slice them into some edible parts. And what people will find is that the outer parts of the mushrooms do seem to be more fresh. So as you kind of cut your way towards the stem, you're going to find it more tough. And
It's tough,
as
woody,
you get
so.
tough, then it's not gonna eat well.
Okay, and the reason, again, hen of the woods and chicken of the woods, that bottom picture, that's not a sliced chicken breast, is
No,
it?
that is chicken of the woods mushroom. So even
That looks
preparing
good.
it looks like chicken.
Kind of a good substitute if you don't want to eat meat. It's kind of tofu of the mushroom world in that sense.
Yep.
Okay, so you could pan fry it, saute it, cream it like we talked about. Good substitute for chicken, stir fry. Would this be good in stir fry?
I think it would. Yeah, sounds good.
And again, if we have too many to eat right now, how do we preserve them?
Well, these mushrooms, the chicken of the woods and hen of the woods, you can freeze without needing to cook them first. So you can either just freeze them, just cut them into parts that, sizes that you want and freeze them. Or you can dry them, and this is especially helpful whenever you're adding them to soups. They taste delicious if you just want to add them to your soup if you've dried them.
Right.
And
You
then
can
again,
pickle
pickled. You
them.
can pickle them. They're wonderful.
That
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
fascinating.
there is actually a really good recipe in the back of our Missouri Wild Mushrooms book for pickled hen, and I've tried that before, and
All
it's
right, and
wonderful.
we are getting to that shortly, some sources for not only identification, but recipes. So a couple questions. Tyler is saying there's no wives' tale that says dump your mushroom soap water in an area and they can grow to spread the fungus from there.
Yeah.
But if
yeah.
it's salt water,
Well, not the salt water, but
when you
the-
rehydrate
yeah,
them,
yeah.
what
Or
they're soaking?
or when you're just like when some people store their mushrooms in water, so
In the
they put it
fridge?
in the refrigerator and keep them in water
That
until
doesn't
they're
have
ready
to
to
be
eat
salt
it.
water.
No, that
Okay.
doesn't have to be salt water. And the theory behind that is that water would have the spores in it. And then when you dump it out, it might grow it. And that's again with kind of like with chopping it up or using, parts of your mushroom that you kind of scatter out and it might be mushroom. Theoretically, it might work, but it is very tricky of getting those environmental conditions just
right. You really have research on that.
It's really hard to get that to go. If it was easy, it would be done and we wouldn't be.
And again, that's kind of, these are wild edible mushrooms. The stuff we buy in the grocery store are typically grown in sterile commercial conditions, and this is something very different.
Yeah, and that's why we can, buy mushrooms out of the produce section and put them directly on our salad and enjoy them because they've been in a sterile environment. But wild mushrooms, of course, have not, so we have to cook them. But yeah, if it was easy to commercially produce morels, we'd probably not be talking about this
Well,
right
exactly.
now. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a good thing to try though, and it can't hurt.
Yeah, it can't hurt. Pop question. Cooper wants to know what's the deadliest mushroom in Missouri?
The deadliest mushroom in Missouri would be the deadly Galerina. And
Appropriately named.
and that is one that is actually shown to kill people. So it can truly be deadly. Now, the mushroom that we have the most poisonings of, though, is the green spored lepiota, and that is the most commonly encountered that people mistake for an edible mushroom because it looks just like the nice portobello mushrooms that we see in the grocery store.
No.
And they're very common, and they pop up in your ground, and we have some references online of what exactly that looks like. And it makes people horribly sick. I've never heard of anybody dying from it, but it's
portobellos do not grow naturally in Missouri.
No.
So if you're out mushroom hunting, that's not a portobello, folks.
Right.
So
right.
keep on walking.
It can be so easy to make. We even try to caution people and even go so far as to recommend just avoid eating little brown mushrooms because the deadly Galerina is a little brown mushroom and we don't want anybody mistaking it for an edible mushroom. And then also white mushrooms that grow in open grassy fields. And there's some edible white mushrooms that you can find in a grassy lawn. Right? Of course, puffballs. And puffballs are a little bit easier to identify. But there's some other edible white mushrooms, but we just really caution people against trying to eat something they think even might be edible because we don't want to anybody to mistake it for like a green spored lepiota that could really make you sick.
So getting back to the important tips, always check and double check every mushroom to make sure it is what you think it is or it's not.
Right, yeah.
And then you never want to eat a raw mushroom because there could be bugs or bacteria. Yeah. So soak them in salt water and then cook them to kill any bacteria. Even edible mushrooms, some folks eat morels and might not feel well after. So they're not poisonous to us, but some people are more sensitive. So if you're trying wild mushrooms for the first time,
Yeah, you just want to eat a little bit first and then wait 24 hours. And if you're fine after that, then that's fine. People can have an allergic reaction to anything. So, even raising babies, whenever babies start on their solid foods, you want to start them with peas and wait for a while. Start them with green beans and wait for a while. Well, mushrooms are no different. So if you haven't had that mushroom before, eat just a little bit. If you're going to have an allergic reaction, you want to have that reaction after consuming just a little bit of the mushroom.
so it's not
a lot
so
of the
terrible,
mushroom.
right?
Right.
And then you say only eat fresh mushrooms. Now, we're not talking versus cooked. We're talking kind of like fresh produce. You don't want to eat the mushy, rotten stuff necessarily. So when you're out looking for mushrooms, what's a fresh mushroom?
Well, and it can be tempting for people when they identify an edible mushroom like a morel, for instance, but it's past its prime, right? So it's slimy or slippery or smelly or gooey. And it's hard to sometimes, maybe harder for some people than others to turn away from that. But yeah, if it's not a fresh mushroom, meaning that, right at its prime, if it's kind of past and it's starting to get too old, don't eat it.
And even we were saying kind of like the woods, chicken in the woods, the oysters, they can get tough and woody.
Yeah, so, they won't taste good anymore.
Yeah,
they taste like cardboard. Yeah.
So, okay, so only fresh. Be sure to inspect every mushroom.
Right, especially with the chanterelles. It's pretty easy to be picking along and then accidentally put a different orange mushroom in your basket.
And if you're buying them from people, which is legal depending on where you've gotten them, always make sure that they have been certified. And people who are selling them should have some kind of proof, a certificate of certification or something.
Yeah, there should be an issued certification card or something like that.
So it's okay to ask for the certification proof if you have any questions. And then always, when in doubt, throw it out.
Yep.
And then this one, check local regulations, because again, some conservation areas, especially nature centers, you're not allowed to pick anything. Other conservation areas you can pick for personal consumption. Private properties, other public areas, always check local ordinances.
Correct, yes.
Okay, good to know. Some questions. Christy wants to know, can you just use your scraps from mushroom morels to grow more morels?
Right. Again, theoretically, it can't hurt to try that. It's probably not going to be successful, but possibly it's worth a shot.
Okay. You mentioned that deadliest mushroom. Can you spell that off the bat or just give it to us again?
Oh, deadly. So Galerina, Galerina, I think.
Okay. So Galerina.
Pretty close.
And then people always talk about the big red mushrooms they find.
Yeah, and those are probably those false morels.
Which are not edible, are poisonous, can hurt you.
We highly recommend people do not eat them. So, and that's mainly because there are a lot of uncertainties with the mushroom. So, and there's some arguments to be made there that, well, I'll make sure I cook all of the toxin out of it, or our mushroom.
Can you do that?
Yes.
Okay.
But you have to know ahead of time how much toxin is in that mushroom to know if you cooked it out. And the fumes can get toxic too. So as the mushroom is cooking and the toxins are cooking out, if there's a lot of that toxin in the mushroom, you can breathe it in. So there's just a lot of riskiness with it. So as an agency, we recommend that you do not eat them, although many Missourians do enjoy that mushroom.
I don't have a problem with it. Well, that's unique to those people.
Right. There's some cautions there that we just expressed that needs to be taken.
Okay, and again, folks, if you have questions, we have about 10 minutes left. We have a little bit more to cover, but share your questions. Here's the $1 million question that probably has no answer. It goes along with, again, Melissa, where's your favorite morel honey hole? Where's that?
I'm going to say, you can keep trying to get it out of me, but I'm not. It's a secret.
Which is the answer. And then somebody wants to know, so how long do you have to be out in the woods to find edible mushrooms?
Apparently a very long time, because
for some people forever, right?
Right.
And again, it's that you want to know the environment where they may grow.
Yeah.
You want to scout an area out. You want to keep visiting that area. And if you find a really good area, you don't want to tell anybody.
Yeah, don't say anything, because then they might come and get your mushrooms. But it's kind of like turkey hunting. I haven't done a lot of turkey hunting, but the first time I went out turkey hunting, I shot a turkey. Like by myself. Now someone called it in for me, but I shot the turkey.
Right.
And then I can talk with somebody else who's been trying to shoot a turkey for years and
I went
hasn't
deer
gotten
hunting for 3 years in a row,
Yeah.
didn't even see a
Yeah,
deer.
morels
So,
are the same
right.
way, you know. One person can come out there and find a mess of them, and somebody else been looking for years and never
Okay.
found any.
Right.
So,
Somebody was asking too, if you're out mushroom hunting, how do you dress for that? And it's really just seasonally appropriate. Good
Oh, yeah,
shoes,
yeah.
tick spray. You want to avoid chiggers and ticks, so you want to dress appropriately for that. It's how
Right.
you would go hiking in the woods.
It really is, yeah, yeah. Sturdy shoes, probably long pants, but yeah, of course, it's such a difficult time this time of year. You know how to dress. Sometimes the
Well, right,
weather
and the
can change on a
things you
dime.
want to take are a mesh bag or basket and a sharp knife.
Right.
Also, somebody wants to know the yellow common chanterelle and the false chanterelle. The big difference, we were talking, the false chanterelle isn't white through when you cut it open.
That's the easiest way to tell.
Easiest way.
Yeah.
Real chanterelles have an entirely white center from the whole thing. Okay, very good. I think somebody asked earlier too, references. So what are Brent, here we're getting your question. What are some good sources for more information on Missouri's wild mushrooms?
Well, we actually do have two references to be able to provide for you all. First of all, our free brochure is the edible and poisonous mushrooms, and you can pick that up at nature centers. I know at various
regional
events
offices, a lot of times, yeah, we'll pass those out. You could also get it online, and you can then either download it or print it off. And if you want that, just simply go to mdc.mo.gov and search edible mushrooms, and this will come up in your search. So A Guide to Missouri Edible and Poisonous Mushrooms. Now, that's an incredible resource, which just also happens to be written by you.
Yeah.
With help from the Missouri Mycological Society.
Absolutely.
So again, further expertise from Melissa Brigler here, folks. And then Missouri Wild Mushrooms. Now that's a paid publication. You will need to purchase that. You can get that through a lot of our nature centers, our regional offices, and we also have an online nature store. So to find all of that, again, just go to mdc.mo.gov and you could search Missouri's Wild Mushrooms or Nature Shop if you want to buy that.
Yeah, and yeah, lots of good recipes in that. And you know, we kind of talk about how morel mushrooms are sort of the gateway mushroom for mushroom hunting, because what we do is go out looking for morels, but then encounter a lot of other types of mushrooms and get more interested in that as well. So this is a good field guide just for the common things that you would be running across Missouri. And it was authored by Maxine Stone, who is also very active in the Missouri Mycological Society.
Yes, very good. So these are some resources through MDC. We also have some recipes online. So both the free guide also has some recipes in it.
No.
Okay, so
now it shows. No, I take that back. It shows how some cooking tips, but
some
not
cooking
really
tips,
recipes.
but not actually. Yeah. So that's where it's the sautéing, preserving, things like that. And that has the mushrooms we talked about, such as morels on the cover, but it also covers some common poisonous mushrooms to help.
It covers poisonous, and it also covers some additional mushrooms we just didn't have time to cover today.
Okay, yeah, like the puffballs and things like that.
Delicious mushrooms.
That booklet too measures, it's probably about 4 or 5 inches across by 8 inches tall. So fold it. It's great to put in your pack or your pocket while you're out in the woods. The purchased book has more information on the wild mushrooms with recipes, with additional information and things. That's a bit bulkier and might not fit in the pocket, but it's a great resource. So these are some resources. One of the most amazing resources that I go to all the time is, again, the Missouri Mycological Society. Great mushroom experts. So if you need help identifying a mushroom, can you just email or go to the website and submit a picture, and can they help identify it?
There's a Facebook page that does have that, and you can post on their Facebook page of different ways to identify or unidentified mushrooms you would like somebody to maybe chime in and give it a shot. But yeah, the Mycological Society really does have a lot of good programs that help people learn more about mushrooms. I think most importantly, they organize these forays, which is basically just walking through the woods looking for mushrooms. And what ends up happening at these forays is they collect the mushroom that they don't know or want to learn more about, and then everybody comes together at the end and kind of joins around the table And hopefully, as the COVID pandemic is starting to hopefully cease a little
Right.
bit, we'll get back into the 4A. We are starting to get back into the 4As, but they're on a limited attendance right now. They're limited to 10 people currently.
Okay, but it's a statewide society, but you said there are chapters throughout the state.
Right.
So these 4As sound like such a great opportunity if you're hesitant, you're not sure what you're doing, to join people who do know what they're doing and some others who might not. So
Right.
what a great group activity. Again, they could help you, what you should wear when you're going on the 4A, what you should bring, and then help in identifying. So it sounds like a lot of
Oh,
fun.
it's a wonderful group of people, and all interested in just learning more about mushrooms. So, and we do have a course schedule that for this year that involves learning 40 common mushrooms. Now, the first course has already
Wow.
passed, so that was in April. Yeah. Yeah, and then so the next one will be June 1st. It's 10 common mushrooms, and then in August we'll return again to another 10 common mushrooms. And then in the fall, we kind of finish off the year with edible mushrooms. And normally these would all be hosted within the chapters throughout the state. But, due to COVID, we've been putting that on just online.
So
for
wherever
now.
you are in the state or in the world, you
Yeah,
can check it out online.
It's been kind of a silver lining because more people have been able to join in on these courses throughout the year because we've been just offering it purely online for now. But also, if you check out the website at www.momyco.org, there's also 4A events that are scheduled throughout the year.
And so those are added too. So
Yeah.
Missouri Mycological Society, an amazing resource for mushrooms in Missouri, mushrooms in general, and especially if you're interested in edible mushrooms, wild edibles like that, check it out. They have a lot to offer. Folks, and if you liked this webcast, we have some previously done webcasts, and we'll have some more coming up in the fall. But you could view our other MDC Wild webcasts. That's the direct link. Or again, you could visit our website at mdc.mo.gov and simply search webcasts. So that's where we are. Another great resource. Melissa, you've been pretty busy this spring with morel season. I know, have you done, or are you doing a Facebook Live on some mushrooms?
Yes,
Okay, you got that. And I know you've written a booklet on it. You've contributed to other things. Even magazine articles and stuff, but we also have our new podcast. So we have an episode on that. So check out MDC's, it's called Nature Boost. Check out our Nature Boost podcast. You could find it on Spotify. You could find it on Apple Podcasts. And with that, you could hear Melissa go actually on a morel mushroom hunt. And she goes with our host, who is Jill Pritchard, for our Nature Boost podcast. So Melissa and Jill are out in the woods checking out morels. You could learn more. You can also listen to Nature Boost episodes through our website. And again, just go to mdc.mo.gov and hit Nature Boost or search Nature Boost, and you could get more from Melissa and our host, Jill. Again, we are about out of time, folks. So thank you, Melissa. This has been wonderful, very informative, educational, a lot of fun. Any kind of top things to leave people with?
Just go out and have fun, enjoy nature. And I think that really hunting for morels kind of leads to a greater appreciation for mushrooms and fungus in general. And it is an amazing field of study, and just to learn more about, there's such a wide variety of different types of mushrooms in Missouri. It's just fascinating.
There some great information. And again, folks, there's risky mushroom hunters and old mushroom hunters, but very few old risky mushroom hunters, because the key thing is always make sure the mushroom that you're about to eat is indeed edible and it is what you think it is. Yes, so that is so crucial. And again, we've given you a bunch of resources. So we're about done. Thank you again, Melissa.
You're very welcome.
So appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. And then again, folks, thanks to all of you for tuning in to our wild webcast on Missouri edible mushrooms and mushroom hunting. Hope you had fun. This will be posted on our website in a day or so. As soon as we get everything put together, you can, if you missed it or if friends missed it, have them go to mdc.mo.gov, search wild webcast, and we will have our mushroom hunting one up there posted soon. So thanks, folks. Get outside and discover nature, discover maybe some morels, and, hey, let us know where they are. Or never. Thanks. Have a great day. We're tuning out.